In a sense, every story is about the person who wrote it. The characters in the story are really just reflections of what the author thinks people are like. This is not some crazy revelation. This is kind of accepted. I mean, there's people who say the death of the author, but at the end of the day, someone had to write what you're reading, right? So, one reason to enjoy art, one of the things that's good about art is it gives you a window into someone's soul. It's a next level of communication. So, like, I don't know, you listen to On GP by The Death Grips and you get a sneak peek into how certain people experience the world, and that's what's interesting. This, I don't have a name for this way of experiencing art because it's not the only way of experiencing art. You can experience art in a much more visceral way where you don't think about any of this. Let's say some other Death Grip songs like, I don't know, uh, brown, brown, brown. You would just experience that. For me, I experienced that purely as emotion. Or come up and get me. I'm not thinking about like who the person who would make this. A little bit I am. Mostly I'm hit purely by the art itself without any sort of meta elements much. Uh, but there are certain things that you would enjoy purely because it's interesting to think about why someone would make something like that. Also, I have stuff in my ear. Don't worry about it. It's for medical reasons. Genuinely. Um, so in his video on Control Alt Delete, H. Bowman guy goes into this a bit with regards to the room and Control Alt Delete. That a piece of art isn't just itself, but it's also representative of the author and the culture which produced it. So he talks about how the room isn't just a funny bad movie, but it also says something about a person who would create something like this and what their opinions are on, for example, women and relationships and what you can extrapolate from that. And I don't know what the name is for that type of thought, but that is my reason for enjoying Horizon on the Middle of Nowhere, because it is by no means a flawless show. In fact, it's arguably quite awful. Um, for example, it's undeniably sexist. Undeniably sexist. The main character is the main character who's clearly some sort of author insert, I would assume, is incredibly sexist. All the women are massive tits out. It's a sexist show. It's just a like misogynistic objectifying women. That's how the show is. And the show is not really critical of it. I mean, the typical thing happens where the guy makes a lewd joke and then the girl kicks him, but he never faces any real consequences for his actions. Uh, like, obviously, most people who think sexism is not great would see this as a flaw in the show, and it's a flaw in the show, but it also gives you a look into the author, and that's what's fascinating to me, is thinking about who would make something like Horizon. What sort of mind would what? How do they see the world? And that's what's amazing because it's made by someone who sees the world, who whose main base level understanding of the world is based in otaku culture, not reality. Their main base understanding of the world is based on how anime people think and how light novel people think, not how human beings think necessarily. That's my interpretation of the show anyway. So the characters don't behave like cartoonified human beings like in most media. They behave like cartoonified anime characters, like cartoonified light novel characters, because that is this how this person interprets the world. This is why I enjoy the show. Not necessarily because the show itself has some incredible philosophical point to make, but because it it if art is supposed to be a window into an artist's soul or some sort of communication tool for the artist, then this guy has accidentally made an incredible piece of art that shows a deep look, an intimate look into his personality, probably not even noticing that that was what he was doing. And that's what I love about it. Um, so, if you start reading the light novels, as I've started, they're very long and I've only just started them, you'll see the way this author thinks is like a fan wiki. He thinks like a fan wiki. Like, before you even get to the first page of the actual story, there is a bunch of pages that are just essentially a wiki about certain elements of this world. They're written like a wiki page in the light novel. It's amazing. It's fascinating. This is also why I like the Monogatari series so much. One of the reasons I like Monogatari so much is because clearly it's just a bunch of shit that Nisi Oisin finds cool. When you look at, this is also one of the reasons, building off of this, when you look at Akiyuki Shimbo's directing, it looks deep, it looks weird and experimental, but clearly this is just the way he just finds it aesthetically pleasing. If you watch Soul Taker, it's all shot in super Shinbo-y style, but Soul Taker itself, the anime, is not particularly, I haven't finished it, but so maybe it switches up, but it's not like fucking Utena, which it looks weird in art house because it has metatextual things to say and it's trying to, you know, subvert certain genre tropes and comment on certain aspects of the medium, and therefore by purposely pulling you out of the medium by using these experimental techniques, or it's also trying to evoke more of like a dreamlike sense. Whereas Shimbo shows, I'm pretty sure, just look like that because Shimbo thinks that it looks fucking cool. And I love that shit. And the reason that Monogatari can go from a intensely personal story about a woman being sexually assaulted to smart about a guy brushing his sister's teeth in a sexual way is because it's just shit after each other that Nisi Oisin finds cool. And it's amazing. It's a more honest projection of a person's soul than someone who puts so much thought into their work could possibly do. Because they are filtering it through their conscious mind, whereas these artworks are purely unconsciously projecting all of this stuff into the things they've made. No matter what you make, a part of you is imbued with it. Even if you just make a chair and you like woodwork, the reason that's artistic is because no matter what you want to do with your life, no matter if you're trying to or not, you're going to end up putting some of yourself into that chair, and therefore you can tell something about the person who made it, or not necessarily. The question is whether you can actually tell something about the person who made it, or whether it's just you projecting your own feelings onto it. I don't know, but I feel like you can't. This is a valid way to interpret art. Not only the person who made it, but the environment they're in. So, going back to Horizon, it's not just that the author sees things in this way. It's that the author is in an environment of the otaku light novel sphere where certain things are less looked down upon than in other spheres, like hyper complexity and front loading a bunch of exposition would be seen as bad writing in most novels. But in this novel it works because in the sphere it's mostly about presenting interesting ideas as effectively as possible. It's most important. If you take a look at something like Accelerator, or the Seven Magical Index type of stories, right? Not necessarily the deepest, thought-provoking serial experiments lane type of thing. Not Evangelion. But it's interesting for other ideas, more like smutty, culty, sci-fi ideas and fantasy ideas that it presents. That's what it's trying to get at. These things that only you have to go kill 10,000 of these clones of this guy. I think it's 10,000, right? Oops. It's like you have to go kill 10,000 clones. The scale of that is like insane. You wouldn't find that in any other media. Just that concept alone is a bunch to think about, and it's just a vehicle for presenting these weird concepts. What if science had something that was akin to magic, but magic wasn't known about, even though it does exist, and it's something separate and religious? Like, that's the world of Index. It's just about just putting ideas, which is kind of how I think. And so you see Monogatari, it's just ideas, pure raw thought. You see Horizon, and it's this environment of otakudom that presents these characters. You got Mecha sitting right next to girls with huge tits and heterochromia, sitting next to automated dolls who are like kuderes, sitting next to like blind, I don't even know what sort of character archetype that's called, like shy girls, like, and then a fucking racist Indian stereotype. Oh yeah, there's a very racist Indian stereotype in Horizon. So why is I still consider it one of my favorite shows? Not because I like racism, but because it's fascinating to me that an entire team of people thought that this was okay. And it's a pure window into their soul. Plus, the ideas in Horizon are actually marvelously interesting and weird. Stuff that you would never find in any other type of media except anime and light novels. Like, the idea of recreating all of history with a weird level of extreme technology, recreating history from a book called Testament in order to attempt traveling to the stars, and the whole thing about the harmonic divine states and the weird political state, stuff that doesn't make any sense if you try and think about it outside of the logic of the show. Like in season 2, where they go to England, and they have this whole discussion with like political intrigue between the leaders of Musashi Ariadas, the leaders of England, and the leaders of like Tres España, all going along. None of it makes sense outside of the logic of the show. Like, Tres España, they have to fight England because in the time that they're recreating from the Testament, the Spanish Armada fought England and lost. But so even though Tres España know, because Tres España are a Testament nation, they are on the side of the Testament, recreating the Testament, unlike Musashi. They say Tess. You can tell if someone's on the side of the Testament because they will say Tess as like a positive agreement. Like we would say okay, they say Tess if they're on the side of the Testament. And the people who are against it, so Musashi, who don't care about the Testament, they say not Tess, they say Judgy, right? So even though Tres España is on the side of the Testament, so they know they're going to lose this battle, they are intent on trying as hard as they possibly can to win the battle, because if they didn't try as hard as they could, the Testament wouldn't be faithfully recreated. But then other things like Double Bloody Mary, where two completely separate... Apologies, they're doing work, which doesn't make any sense. How are they allowed to do work during the whole lockdown thing? It doesn't make any sense. Whatever. So, like, Double Bloody Mary doesn't make any sense, because she's not an accurate recreation of history. She's two completely separate historical characters who lived many years apart from each other, combined into one body. It doesn't make any sense. But within the show's logic, the show just is like, fuck, it doesn't matter, because it's an interesting concept. This is why it's cool. It's pure id, I guess, is what you could say. It's kind of like, just saying id reminded me, when you're playing Doom or Quake, and you're in these environments, and they don't make logical sense. Like, none of these places would actually exist. Why would E1M1, I think that's what it's called, right? First level in Doom, exist? It doesn't, like, there's no way there would be a bunch of toxic waste and a small bridge over them to, like, a room for... It doesn't make any sense as a logical building to exist. But somehow, on a raw, ideal level, it makes sense as a place naturally. you'd never question it. You never stop to think, hold on, why would they make a place like this? You just think, it just hits you on an emotional level or on a subconscious, surreal, dream logic level. And there we go. That is the appeal of Horizon on the Middle of Nowhere and a bunch of that whole entire swarm of art, is that it's a pure look into an artist's soul through unbridled insanity and questionable logic, which gives you actually a deeper look and is more effective as art than something which is incredibly deeply thought through. Sometimes. Like, for example, you listen to Bach, and the only opinion you get on Bach is that he really likes writing Bach songs. And don't get me wrong, I love Bach. I think he's obviously, hot take, Bach is a genius. But there's no, it's not the same thing. It's a completely different appeal. That appeals to you on a more logical level, whereas, or a more linear level. We're using words here. A more linear level, whereas these artworks are more focused on, well, not trying to pretend that we're logical creatures. This is made for humans by humans. And it doesn't matter if any of this is intentional. None of it is intentional. They didn't mean to make an artwork about how they think racism is okay because they've never fully interacted with an Indian person in their life or really have a concept of how the stereotypes might be damaging and what that says about Japanese society in general. They never thought about that, but their art does talk about it. They didn't put it in there intentionally, but it's there. It's quite there, out in the open for you to read. They never thought about how their artwork is a commentary on otaku culture's strange love of women and also complete sexualization of them, which simultaneously imbues them with a massive amount of agency and no agency at the same time. They didn't put that in there intentionally, but it's there, it's in the text, you can read it, it's quite apparent that it's clearly bringing that to, that's something that's in the text. They didn't put it there intentionally, but it's in the text. That's why I like Horizon. Not for anything that was done on purpose. Well, for some things that were done on purpose. I think all of the concepts that the author thinks are cool. I think they're all cool. Well, I don't think racism and sexism are necessarily cool, but I think most of the fantasy concepts and sci-fi concepts are really cool. One of my favorites being in season 2, there's a big battle, and they have a bunch of these combat automated doll maids defending the ship by putting up shield magic. But instead of, in most of the time you see shield magic, if you're putting up a really strong shield, it would just be one big, really strong shield. But instead, the way they make really strong shields in this world is that they don't have the power to make one shield stronger. That wouldn't make sense. How can you, if you can make one shield that's just stronger anyway, why wouldn't you just always make the super strong shield? So instead, they have their normal shield, and they just stack 20 of them in a row in front of each other. They go, and then a bunch of shields pop out into the sky, all the normal one behind the other, and then the missile slams in, and it's like shooting a bullet through panes of glass. It smashes through the first one, slightly slows, and then gets stopped before it reaches the bottom. So it destroys a bunch of them, but never reaches the bottom. Just that little detail is so cool. Or how the Testament countries use magic. All the magic comes up in a weird technological fashion with these little hologram things. And the Testament countries all have crosses and Christian symbolism in their holograms, but Musashi has Torigate in their holograms. Now, why would that exist in the universe of the show? No reason. There's no reason that history would have evolved into that. Like, there's no logical reason for them to look that way. In fact, it's never explained how they exist in the first place. It doesn't make any sense. It's magic. It doesn't. It's that's how the magic system works. Don't question it. But the fact that that little detail is in there, is cool. Also, well, that's a bunch of shit. But that's the appeal. Is these tiny details that no one else would have thought, and the fact that thinking about what the fact that they would put these weird details in says about the artists who would create it, not necessarily because they did it on purpose, but just because that was how they thought about things. And it's, there you go. I think I've done a good job explaining my attitude towards the show and shows of its type, like Index, and also probably like Handshakers, for example. I've only just started watching Handshakers, but the Handshakers is fascinating to me because not because it's a good show plot wise or character wise, but the fact that it got made is what's interesting to me, and that makes it a good show because it says something. It makes an artistic statement. It says something about the creators, which if you say something about the people who create it, that's that's art. That's what art is. So whether or not they did it on purpose is not really important here. Death of the author. This is what, if you didn't know, this is what Death of the Author is. What I'm saying right now, this is what Death of the Author is. Because Death of the Author is used on YouTube in a million different ways by people who don't understand it. What I'm talking about right now, this whole thing of, this is Death of the Author. Either way. Like, yeah, Handshakers is a similar thing. I don't know if it'll be on my favourites. It's not as interesting plot-wise and concept-wise. Like, it has the same sort of thing of, like, how the fuck did this get made? This is fascinating, the fact that something like this could get made in the first place. But it then doesn't have the same really out there experimental and wacky concepts that Horizon does. Or, as they call it in Japan, Kyohora. Kyosetsuji no Horizon. I don't remember how the first... Anyway, I'm rambling. Let's finish this video.